Good morning. I am Frances Day and I head In the Company of Leaders. And today's little quandary is about asking great questions. The reason I've come up with this is because I've always known that being asked a great question gets great answers. So the cleverer you are about the question that you ask, the better the quality of answer that you get. And I've always respected people who ask great questions. I think they're clever. I value their time and their knowledge. So I always seek out people who ask great questions. During this video, I'm going to give you 4 key bits of skill that will help you to phrase your questions correctly and get the most out of questioning. The reason I've come across this is because in my past business, Bird Board, the questioning was always at the heart of what we did. So there was, at its peak, there were 150 members across 15 boards across the north of the UK. And it was women business owners who were there to support one another and help each other with their challenges. So of course, getting to the bottom of the challenge was always about asking great questions. Most of us have heard of Napoleon Hill, the Think and Grow Rich guy. And what's fascinating about this book is that it was actually written in the 1930s. Napoleon Hill is a man who was an absolute advocate of mastermind groups. So in his time, there were amazing men around like Henry Ford, Thomas Edison and Harvey Firestone from Firestone Tyres. And these guys were all in the same group and they created their own little mastermind group. Can you imagine the conversations that must have gone on behind the scenes with these chaps? I've recently been reading the next book of Napoleon Hill's, which is called The Law of Success. And he goes into a lot more detail about these mastermind groups with these chaps. So they would meet regularly to exchange ideas and connect with one another. But also, on a much more fascinating level, what happened over time was that their energetic frequencies connected with one another. So they were all vibrating at the same energy frequency. So they all started in a very similar way with no money, little resource. But over time, these guys were collectively earning billions of dollars. And in the 1930s, that is just beggars belief really, doesn't it? He says, I'm just reading it here, that simply by being in the presence of one another, they were able to sort of feed off each other's insights and intelligence. Wow. Wouldn't you love to be able to invite them all for dinner and pick their brains? I definitely would have. He also says, when the human brain, when it is depleted, needs to be recharged, and the manner of which this is done is through more contact with a more vital mind or minds. So I guess what he's saying is that we need mental stimulation from people to help raise our vibration and stimulate our curiosity and energy. So this has stimulated the topic for today, which is about asking great questions. So we all have those moments in time, don't we, where we've got this one question that's going round and round and round in our head and we just can't flip and make a decision. Do I date the guy? Do I go to this networking event? Do I commit to this particular piece of work? I've had this offer of a house. Do I take it? Don't I take it? I need some premises for my business. Do I sign on the dotted line for this 2-year lease? It's a big commitment. All that stuff, that keeps us awake at night. So tip number 1 is, usually because we're so busy, we'll go, I haven't got time for this, or do I have time for X, Y, and Z, whatever it is that you're making a decision about. So why not flip that on its head and say, do I have the energy for it completely changes the perspective of the question. I'll come on to this in a little bit more detail a bit further down the line, but if you're changing it to do I have the energy, let's use the example of if you were going to work with a new client. Do I have the energy to work with this new client? So that might bring up things like, are they paying me enough? Are they paying me what I'm worth? How much time are they going to take up? When I come to the end of the session, do I feel better for working with this person? Or do I feel worse? Do I feel completely drained? Can you see how changing the question gives you a much more in-depth and a more intuitive answer? Have you heard the phrase drains and radiators? So someone who is a drain is someone who drains your energy, and someone who is a radiator radiates energy. It makes complete sense, doesn't it? The other thing about positive people is that they make you feel good. And positive people attract positive things into their lives. So it's because their frequencies are vibrating at a much higher level than other people's. And positive energy is a much stronger vibration than negative. So this leads me nicely on to tip number 2, which is surround yourself with positive people. I can't emphasize this enough, it'll make such a difference to your life. Surround yourself with radiators. These are people who respect you, who challenge you, who want to bring out the best in you. I think I realised pretty quickly that my friends and family that that have been in my life since I was little have completely different perspective on what they think is the right thing for me. So asking them a question about my business, they were never going to give me the right answer because they were always thinking about me as a person. So, working too long hours, putting far too much energy into a work thing, where what they weren't seeing was this was the thing that was my passion, my reason for living, my purpose. So their perspective was very different from mine. So I'd like to give you examples, tip number 3, of how to ask better questions. So let's use this as an example. Let's say that you are recruiting a new person into your company and you've organised the interviews. The first thing I would say to you is recruit for attitude, not for skill. These people can have come with a fantastic CV, with a myriad of different qualifications, and on paper they can seem perfect for the job. However, that doesn't mean that they're going to be the right person. And by asking the right questions, what you're doing is drilling more into their attitude, because they can have all the skills in the world, but if their attitude's not right, then they're not going to be the right person for your business, are they? And the second few things are, you can test their attitude by looking at things like, did they show up on time? Are they dressed appropriately? Did they present to you in a professional way? All that stuff shows that they're keen. So that's tapping into their attitude. And then here's an example of some of the types of questions that you can ask them. So the first one might be, describe an example of how when something went really well. What you're doing here is you're tapping into their internal terrain, into their storytelling from their memory. And they're really thinking about something that went well for them. And you can tell by their body language whether they're getting excited, if they're passionate about the story that they're telling. And this shows the enthusiasm for the job. The next question I would ask them after that is, can you give me an example of how you could have improved that? And that will show their analytical skills. They'll really start to dig deep and think about, 1 or 2 things that they could have made better. It will also show that they've taken the ego out of the situation, which I think is a really interesting question to ask someone. And then finally, the final question is, what did they value most about the process? This is a really insightful question to ask them, because they might answer it with things like the team, the people. They might answer it with, I learned a lot. They might say that there were certain things that they knew that they could do better afterwards. And the way that they answer it is a really insightful way of learning how they think and their analytical skills. What you're doing here is you're subtly asking them to talk about themselves, envisioning their future. So subtly what you're doing is you're making them feel good about themselves too, which is always a wonderful thing to do. You're being a radiator to them, aren't you? You can use this process in lots of ways to get the best out of people. I think finally in this particular situation, go inside and think, how did this person make me feel? Did they make you feel positive or negative? Do you feel better after the interview or worse? Drain or radiate? So tip number 4 is about general questions. So you could ask yourself a question like, should I go to this networking event? Should I buy this new top? Should I sign up for these new premises? But a better way of asking questions is asking open questions. Questions like, what would it take for me to earn this amount of money, X amount of money? Where do my target audience hang out? What does my new business look like? Can you see the difference in the questions? They're not black and white questions. They're very open, broad questions. And the reason these are such great questions is because what you're doing is you're tapping into the universe. You're telling the universe that this is what you want, but it's not an A or B answer. Because what I love about this is that the universe has got it all mapped out for you already. And you have no idea what the answer is going to be. You might be making a decision about whether to take these premises on, but actually there's some far better premises around the corner that are much more suited to your business in 12 months, 18 months down the line. And you don't know what's coming in the future, but the universe does. So ask that broad question and then brainstorm it. Put it down on a piece of paper and just do, pros and cons, what it looks like, what would happen if. Concentrate on one question at a time. Honestly, it really works. It's like magic. So post your questions below. Put something down that you've been playing around with and I'll have a look at it for you and I'll help you rephrase it if you're struggling. I promise you it's a really fascinating process. Or you could share an example of a question that you've created, just to give some insight for people who are watching. Intelligent questioning is a really creative process, and we are such fabulous species of people. We don't give ourselves credit for how intelligent and how creative we are. So play around with this, have some fun, and post your comments below and let me know how you're getting on with it. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Take care. Bye bye.